Thanks so much. Political reporter Peter Saul in Westminster. Bilal Shami is the research and policy coordinator for the Rethink Rebuild Society and is with me now, a charity working to improve the lives of refugees. Bilal, thank you very much indeed for being with us tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
As we hear this being debated in the House of Commons and the moment that happened over the weekend, do you think the US, the UK and France did the right thing by ordering strikes?
I mean, definitely, we, in principle, we're against any use of chemical weapons as applied to innocent civilians. But the question we're asking here is, why is the focus only being on the use of chemical weapons? Atrocities have been committed in Syria for the past 7 years using conventional, non-chemical weapons. So I feel like there's a great limitation when we only focus on the chemical aspect of it. In my opinion, there needs to be a very strong deterrence against any kind of atrocities, and that would help actually reach a ceasefire, stop this conflict, and facilitate a peace process.
I guess one of the areas that people have looked at, and the point you raised there of some 8 and more years of problems with President Assad and Syrians facing the brunt of that, is the use of chemical weapons and the fact that, you know, across the world they are illegal to use that type of weaponry. And that's the distinction, I guess, here in this particular point, even though, as you rightly say, many people will hear what you're saying about the ongoing struggle for the last 8 years or so.
Yes, but I don't see also a distinction and violation of international law when a regime besieges populations and starves them, when a regime tortures detainees to death, when there's indiscriminate barrel bombing on the communities. These are all violations of international law, and they are no less unlawful than the use of chemical weapons. In fact, civilians have been killed by majority, have been killed by non-chemical conventional weapons. Most of the atrocities were happening using non-chemical weapons, and these are also violations of international law. So, I mean, we can't accept this argument that it was only the use of chemical weapons that was illegal. No, a lot of illegal acts have been committed over the past 7 years, and there has been no form of accountability whatsoever to stop these crimes.
Bilal Shami is with me on BBC Radio Kent, the Research and Policy Coordinator for the Rethink Rebuild Society. As a Syrian yourself, as you watch those images, you hear those stories and hear from those you know, what do you think it will take to end what's going on in Syria right now?
I mean, I have to say, it's been very, very difficult to see the bombing that has happened over the past few days. But it has also been very difficult for me to see the bombing that's been happening for the past 7 years. So my only hope, and I say this with bitterness, but my only hope is some form of deterrence. That's military, diplomatic, political pressure and deterrence into stopping the Syrian regime, mainly because it's been the one that's committing these attacks, for it to stop these attacks, to commit to a political process that ends the military conflict, and then there needs to be a proper ceasefire that facilitates a political process, because otherwise, while the regime feels like it has the upper hand, it will not budge into any pressure to entering into negotiations. Both sides need to see that there can't be a military solution, that they need to cooperate with the political process, and deterrence and pressure must be applied.
So you believe it was right that Theresa May took that action with the US and France on Saturday?
Yes, I'm saying that there must be pressure, whether it's form of military, political, diplomatic, but any form of pressure that sends clear messages to the regime that it can't go on committing these sorts of crimes, whether using chemical weapons or non-chemical weapons, that it must budge into pressure and stopping all kinds of atrocities to facilitate the political process. Because as things stand for the past 7 years without this kind of process, political talks alone haven't been working. The regime hasn't been cooperating, and it has seen that it is being allowed internationally, between quotations, to do as it likes and militarily solve this conflict. And this is not the way forward. This won't grant sustainable peace in Syria, nor will it grant justice to the victims who have suffered over the past 7 years.
Bilal Shami, thank you very much indeed for your time tonight here on BBC Radio Kent.